Mm-hmm. What is up, you guys? Hopefully you guys could see me and hear me. This is the premiere episode of wicked crazy Pinfall. So, we'll see what happens. So, you gotta love streaming. Alright, hold on. It's all not going to go as well as fixed, you know? So, but anyways, lower the volume. Okay. Is that a lot better? Alright, so let's get to what's going on. I got to stop these things. Hopefully you guys can hear me, because obviously I can't hear anything back. All right, Rob. So let's get into the big stuff on it. We're gonna go from right straight off from last night. It was interesting because of the fact that Asuka came out and they had her chant out Becky, which is kind of an homage from the past. But the one more thing is kind of becoming more predictable is that how they're setting up this the Fatal 4-Way from last night. Well, the problem with that is that everybody already figured out that Nia was going to face Asuka to begin with. So what was the purpose of having Natty and Charlotte in there when, you know, they're not really going to be doing that much? I mean, you got Natty set up for the whole thing to be the fall person, but you have Charlotte also there for, you know, because she's the NXT champion and supposedly the workhorse. So to me, it was one of those things. It's like the triple threat match was probably the best night of the whole show last night, but it was kind of just upsetting because they just had Natty as the fall person all the time, and it's not really right. She deserves a lot better than that. Andrade losing to Apollo was the mint condition. That's what I'm gonna say, just because of the fact that with everything going on with Apollo and everybody saying that, you know, he has had a rough time of things, it should have gotten a lot better. And at the end of the day, it's more worth it than anything. I mean, like I always said, Paulo's ideal opponent for me for basically doing stuff is, you know, a lot better than it should be. And to me, Keith Lee is that guy that could actually elevate him even higher. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. You never know, right? Well, who wants to figure out who's drinking whose Kool-Aid? And that is Seth. Seth, man. It's more interesting that things the way they are. So, try to fix that again. How Seth has now become like the predominant thing in WWE, where with it coming to a stable, it almost seems like half of Seth's career is all wrapped around stables. And it doesn't seem like, to me at least, he can do it majority of the time alone. So, at least for now, him having these people around him is a great thing. Now, a lot of things, if you put in AOP and stuff like that, they're going to be in one strong faction. The problem with that is that it kind of reminds me of past factions in the past. Now, somebody said on Twitter the other day, or yet last night on the Fightful review, that Ruby Riott should be a part of that because she's 8-0. The problem with that is that you would actually create a borderline comparison to, and a lot of people forget about this as a faction, is the Straight Edge Society. Well, the thing about it with the Straight Edge Society is that, you know, they had dominant males and one dominant female, and if Seth does that, it's going to create kind of a bunch of comparisons where Seth should be by himself. He could have people to elevate him, but he really doesn't need that as a heel. We've already seen that done in the past. He's a really bad babyface, though, on top of that. You know, it's going to get better, hopefully, with when they bring back people eventually. It will be one of those things where they push it on. But, you know, Rollins cutting a promo on Ray with the mask, it kind of was like a little bit resemblance of like somebody holding an urn. Wink, wink. But it's going to be a fun time watching Raw, especially with them slowly bringing people back. It's just one of those things that it could be a possibility they're writing off Ray. You don't know that. You never know. But with the Iconics came out afterwards, it was like it kind of didn't seem something right. Now, reading body language and a little bit into it, they caught me a little bit because of the fact that they looked like they didn't want to be around each other and stuff. So it almost looked like there was trouble in paradise. Wink. But at least one of those things that it got you into them is being a tag team, and that's what they need to be. Right now on Raw, just for the women's titles in general, the Iconics is pretty much the only ones that stand out in that tag division. And it has to be a lot more efficient and a lot more better. I mean, you could bring up, two other people from NXT, and will literally strengthen the women's division. But also, this could also be another reason why a women's mid-card title should be had. Because if you're using the tag titles for the women's side as the main point as a mid-card women's title, it doesn't justify having a really good tag time. Because of the fact that you're putting the tag titles aside just to end up being like just out of nowhere thin air. The purpose of that title is to be a floating title where it could go to Raw, Smackdown, or NXT. But if they build up a women's title, a decent mid-card title, and have all three brands, then you're talking about something. You're talking about the people like Ruby Riott. You're talking about Liv Morgan. You're talking about all these valuable women's talent that is sitting in these three brands while they're having three dominant champions. Bayley just passed 365 for SmackDown's champion. So it just shows that it's not going to happen for a while. It's also one of those things is that you have Charlotte now in NXT and Asuka in Raw. What are you going to do with all these women feuding with each other and just not pushing anything? The women's mid-card would actually do that. glare. It would actually put more focus on everything else, and it'll actually strengthen, in my opinion, the integrity of the women's division because of the fact that it will be a main focus other than that. Look at the IC title, the United States title, the North American title, and all the men's divisions. People are now focusing on those titles as a secondary title besides the tag titles. And then when making the championship titles a little bit more special. Women in general should have that title. It should be one of those things that should be allowed in WWE and just a broad wrestling in general. The Iconics were right. They should be the top dogs in the SmackDown and in the women's tag titles. But right now with Alexa and Nikki doing what they're doing, it's kind of hard to make a statement not to change the titles on them at all. It's one of those things that has to be the reason why the NXT titles for the men's has to be raised up with Riddle and Dunn having it. They have to elevate it. Well, the only two people you could think of right now to elevate it, other than if you do give it to the Iconics, because look what they did with them last time. They did absolutely nothing. They were just holding them, and that was it. Whereas Alexa and Nikki have been holding it, and they've been fighting champions. Regardless of the way you look at it, the two runs they have, they were fighting every single person on the roster. Now, the next thing is what's happened is that with these titles, they just almost seem like they disregarded as much. They should be more prevalent if with the women's movement is supposed to keep going further, which I fully believe it's going to be, and it should. So I really hope that WWE pays attention to these titles and not use them as like the 24/7 title. By the way, don't get me started on that one. You got the Claymore Countryman at the MVP lounge, and freaking Bobby ended up showing up at the end. And the best part was just Drew getting his finisher on MVP to make this the whole setting to end the night for Raw in general, which was basically a foreshadow. You know, Garza winning last night was pretty good. I mean, if you're going to get a win over KO, you might as well make it substantial, you know? I mean, it has to make an impact, regardless of anything you have to do. So hopefully, you know, they do something with KO where it elevates him. Maybe throw him back into the United States title hunt. Let him and Apollo go after each other for a little bit. Or another thing is that if AJ has the Intercontinental title and they start doing, God forbid, whatever they're deciding to do. Oh, the fucking brand split. Oops, hopefully no demonetized. On first show, they need to stop considering these quote-unquote brand splits when it's just actually a quote-unquote joke. Just say what it is. Just say you're going to put both brands into one shot like you did for a long period of time and leave it alone. It will defeat the purpose, especially with the whole thing with COVID. It will actually help everything long-term. The short term is that eventually you're going to have to split the brands again and everything else. Regardless, it doesn't really make any sense, but you need to do something in order to keep people's interest. And right now it seems like part of the show, people are like wavering. I know for me for a fact, until like the tag team match with Murphy and Theory, the KO match with Garza was okay, but I thought it could be a little bit better. But Murphy and Theory literally drinking out of like Seth's Kool-Aid is kind of pushing them to be better. It could be creating some issues down the line, but I really do believe Alistair in that tag match strengthened out everything. He was actually the star of that whole thing. It was just weird that how things ended because of the fact the way everything else with the whole Ray thing and, you know, having Alberto Carrillo just doing what he has to in order to make everything better. I mean, a lot of people are not high on that kid, and I wish for the best, but I don't know how long they're going to have to keep him around. And the problem with that is that if the viewers don't think high of him, I'm sorry, that's the way it's going to have to be. Until something in that kid snaps. But for Monday coming up, they pulled the trigger on Alistair versus Seth too early. That is literally a high quality, possibly main event pay-per-view match. You've got Seth, probably one of the best heels in the company, and you have Alistair, who's probably the third most protected person in the company. And you're putting them two on a televised match when people probably years ago, back in the day, would be clamoring, begging for all of this type of match for them to just let it rip and go and beat the crap out of each other. It's just got to be insane. It's got to be like a little Wicked kind of almost. There ain't no Blue Chew. Not yet. But it literally has to like get better. This is a match where they have the tools for two great performers, two former NXT champions, to go at it at a top level and see what they can do. They have to push the cord and push Alistair to a title defense. How they do it, we don't know. But the best part is that with Apollo, he could turn around and be a fighting champion, and him and Alistair could go at it. That would be an amazing match. They could have him go after Drew after SummerSlam. There's so many possibilities with Alistair in his character and unique. It's really intriguing and puzzling. It's kind of like a weird Rubik's Cube where one part of the cube does not get in there and you get annoyed. But you're actually having fun trying to get it done. That's the best part of all that stuff. The triple threat match with Nia the Annihilator. You got Natty and Charlotte. I mean, the power bomb into the table was amazing. Some of the spots were really good where, a breakup of the figure eight was really good. Natty trying to put the sharpshooter on Nia and Charlotte. The Tower of Doom spot was interesting. But the problem with that is, even if the match was really good and Asuka was gold, Asuka was money. Like, anything you put her on a mic, everybody's just going to stop and listen right now. And that's the best part of her character. You could actually see her work as a wrestler, but you can actually see her mic skills, which probably were phenomenal before. But because of the way she's playing up, it's just amazing. Kind of like, Nani, like, what? Like, how good people could think about it. Like, if you put her in front of a commentary table permanently, down the line when she's done is going to be amazing. The match was actually physically good, but it was really awesome at the end. Oh boy. And now we come to Gronk. Everybody in the Fightful community already knows where I stand about this. And if you want your epic rant, here it is. Gronk shouldn't have that title, and it shouldn't have happened at WrestleMania. I'm sorry, but literally, yeah, I'm from Boston. Yes, he's not playing for the Patriots anymore. But at the end of the day, you can't have somebody that's not willing to defend something like this in an instant in order to, even though it's a joke title, it's a title nonetheless. And that way you can actually help it be elevated. Get people that are not even there yet some TV time, and that helps it. At the end of the day, it just has to be something good. And hopefully, one of these days they do something with that title. Joke title or not, but Gronk shouldn't be having it. And I still have that mandate. I said on Twitter that I will buy a Bengals jersey if he brings it to the Super Bowl. And at the end of the day, that's the way it's supposed to be. But Gronk shouldn't have that title. And it's a joke title, yes. Not like the Universal title and all other titles. But it has to be a title where it's defended. I get we're in a COVID situation. Like I said on Warren's show, it's a COVID life. We're in a COVID world. But a title's a title, and an opportunity is an opportunity. And it has to be done. It's just one of those things where it has to be done. At the end of the day, if you're not upholding a title for a company, what's the point of holding it? Yes, you're famous. Yes, you have notoriety. But in the reality of life, notoriety and all that stuff does not mean as much as the people that are next to you at the end of the day. And that's the honest truth. Good segue. So, one of those things is that we just noticed this morning, and I woke up, is that Drew Guilak is back in the fold. I can't wait. If you give me more matches like Drew and Daniel, and this is going to help me with the next part, why don't you give me a match, a fantasy match? Riddle versus Guilak. Two people, that are good on the ground. Him and Daniel, like he was with Thatcher. And let them go, especially since all three of them now are going to be on Smackdown. I mean, come on. It has to be something where it's just amazingly put. You put Guilak against, Riddle. Hell, bring up Thatcher. You have all four of them go at it. I bet you Sean Sapp will have like a smile on his face ear to ear. It's a match where it's back to the ground source of what wrestling really is, which is the amateur style kind of match. It's going to end up being one of those things where you're going to want these 4 people. It's not the main roster, but you want them either on Smackdown or something to elevate the style of the brand rather than not. And I literally can't wait to see it. Now, what they do with Riddle, my opinion is different than others. I think Riddle should go straight into something where he can go after the title. So let's say if Daniel wins the Intercontinental title, have Riddle challenge him. Because people have been posting pictures all day stating that it could be a possibility one day that Riddle is there and Oldberg shows up. It'll be one of those things where if he does show up, people will end up getting the money for it. And it'll be one of those things where it will be an insane moneymaker for WWE. And regardless of that, it's going to be interesting to see this. Now, whether they do the trigger or not, that's fine. But a lot of people are probably being upset right now, especially with the cage match and this being possibly announced and being possibly true, if it is true, that Riddle got gypped out of the NXT title. Well, the problem with that is that, and I've thought of this closely, is that Riddle wasn't going to get a shot at the NXT title. Just because of the fact that you have Adam Cole sitting there holding the title. If Hunter thinks highly of Cole and keeping him as the champion as long as he has, some of the rest of the roster have to look at the North American title as it's going to be like a Brock situation. They have to look at it like that, where the rest of the men's talent has to go on to that. It's the same situation with the women's, like I said. But if they need to do something else other than the tag titles, they have to do something else. And even if he doesn't need the title, a lot of people believe he does and should have it, or probably before right now. But with TakeOver coming around, some of those matches are going to be amazing. Regardless, you've got multiple storylines, and some of these in-depth storylines with NXT right now, they can go on past SummerSlam all the way until the fall, possibly even to December. You know, even if it's one of those things that just makes it go, it goes. It helps. It pushes. And it could be multiple things. You could probably have Cole and Cross. You could have Ciampa versus Lee. You could have Dijakovic against, anybody. With Riddle being gone, it's going to leave an extra spot open. Maybe somebody from the Performance Center actually takes it. Excuse me. There's multiple choices. There's multiple ways of doing this. Hence why fantasy booking is actually a good idea at times, but you always get it wrong. Very rarely get it right. I'll even admit that whole thing with Otis was a 1 in a million shot. It was just a good guess. But that right now is the only storyline that has any interest. If you had to look at both, just not NXT, but if you look at Raw and SmackDown right now, the Otis, Mandy, Ziggler, Sonya, Money in the Briefcase, wackadoodle kind of thing is the only thing that is everybody's keeping their interest. And I'm hoping that one day they add more stuff like this, because it's going to make everything a lot more stronger. It's going to make it more favorable. And hopefully it'll make it even more interesting. You're going to have Otis pick whether he wants to pick one or two things. Love or championships. And hopefully he does the right thing. Now, I'm with everybody. I'm down for them to have the tag titles. If they cash it in for the tag titles, it would be great. The thing about it is that I don't think it'll be the SmackDown titles, because I think right now, as it stands with the logjam on SmackDown, Heavy Machinery needs to be on Raw in order to advance. Because right now, you look at the vignettes with the Street Profits and the War Raiders or Viking Raiders. they are the only two teams that are being shown constantly. So if you throw Otis and Tucker on there, it's gonna take that logjam out of SmackDown and it'll make it better. Even if since the Usos are out, it's still gonna make something better because you still have more talent in that area to do so. But we'll see what happens. I mean, it's only Tuesday, and after the week we've all had, we need some positive stuff in our lives, especially with the passings that we've had and all the craziness and stuff. So having Drew come back is a godsend right now. We got SmackDown Friday. We got NXT. The cage match, I'm hoping, is going to be one of those things where they did the same thing the first time around a week ago, where it was just a barn burner, like non-stop fun, going crazy kind of deal. And I'm hoping it keeps going like that. Eventually what will happen is that after Riddle goes, Thatcher has to find somebody. And Loomis might be the actual good way to go if they're going to keep Thatcher as a single wrestler. It could be a possibility. I mean, we need a lot more quality matches like, Riddle and Thatcher had, because a lot of them are just like substance, no go. Candice and Johnny's storyline is interesting because you have Lee in there with Mia, and it could lead into an in your house match against couple versus couple, and just to push it off towards another takeover where it could be here in Boston. Now, before everybody gets on me, yes, I know about the state of the city. Yes, I know what Boston's saying. I know all this stuff. But the fact of the matter is it's TD Garden still promoting the show. I just checked about an hour ago. They're still showing tickets could possibly be sold. And hopefully it keeps going like that. We need to have some bright spots in the world, and we need to do something great. And eventually what will happen is that it will end up being, it'll end up being varnished. Now, people coming back from all this stuff is going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. But a lot of people think that they won't be here seeing all these shows eventually for a while now. And I hope to God that is not the case. Because at the end of the day, we need some entertainment and something fun, and you need to have some enjoyment also. So eventually what it has to be is that wrestling has to come back. It has to come back to the full 100% of it, where it's right in front of people and stuff like that. But with how long this COVID thing's going on, there's no certainties. It's going to be one of those things. I hope that we will be back to square one, not in front of our TVs, but all gathering together in one spot. And that's the best part. Because we need each other. We need wrestling. We need entertainment, amusement, video games, movies. We all need to sit in a place where we can all gather together and actually, think about the same things and understand everything at the same time. Hence why, being on here, it helps. It's like an outlet to talk. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But we'll see what happens with SmackDown. We'll see what happens with NXT. We'll see what goes on in a couple of days, because it's still Tuesday. This is still the first show, and it's still going to keep going on. Fightful broke out that someone in Kairi Sane got hurt at a taping, but there's no footage, so we all have to be patient and wait on that. I'm hoping that, eventually it will be rectified, but they have to seriously look at Nia as a talent. As a person, it seems like she's a great person, but she has a reoccurring history of hurting people, and eventually one of those people are not going to get up. And that's the scary part of all this stuff. Nobody wants to see anyone get hurt. Look at Britt Baker before the Double or Nothing show. She's injured. We have had, multiple women in the last year hurt. You have to see it differently, and there has to be a way to protect people. And obviously, it's not happening. It's not working. So either Nia has to be retrained, or she has to figure a way to make sure the person she's working with is going to be fine. Because there's no reason for somebody to get hurt. Especially if stuff happens, yes, but there's no reason for others just to hurt each other. They're trained professionals to a point, but they still need to enjoy it. Yeah, Nia is a locker leader. One of these days, one of these people are not going to end up getting up from Nia's doing something. So regardless whether they give her the shot and then something else happens, but you have to figure out the next lines. I mean, the NXT title, you've got, Charlotte going against Rhea. Oh, man. In EO. Sorry. And Charlotte's going to come out of that, which only gives you one idea. What they're going to have to do next is that they're going to have to pull the trigger on Rhea to come up. Because right now, other than Sasha in that division and SmackDown, there is no other women on that roster that can lay a hand on Bayley. And the only threat is not even there. There's one threat that's in Raw not being used, and that's Bianca Belair, and there's another one in NXT. Rhea's the only option. Rhea's going to annihilate her. As much as I like Bayley and what she's doing as a heel, Rhea is going to end up possibly being called up after the takeover and possibly go from there. It's going to be fun watching NXT's takeover in your house. Now, the match I'm more looking forward to is the Ciampa Cross match, just because of the brutality of it. You let these two guys go, these two bulls in a china shop, it's just going to be amazing. And at the end of the day, it'll just be one of those things you're just sitting back and you're just like in awe. It almost is the equate to, how am I going to put this? It's almost kind of like Austin and Rock in the beginning. You have two prime studs ready to go, ready to show that they're the best at what they do, and just let them go. Just let it rip. And that way it'll happen and everything else. It's going to be one of those matches where it's going to be better than the greatest wrestling match ever. What I thought is that the whole, speaking of which of that, Edge should have just let Edge not continue from it, but just kept going. And there's never going to be TikTok on here, Benny. But at the end of it all, it's still going to have a good pay-per-view. It's still going to be great, and they're still building on it. So at the end of the day, at least it's going to be one of those shows where it's going to be enjoyable. But for now, I mean, we'll see. It's still early. In this whole past week with, everybody, the 3 passings we had, the whole Owen R thing. Owen was an amazing guy, amazing wrestler from everything, all the documentaries and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I mean, Owen deserves his due. And honestly, like I said, it's not our say whether he should go into the Hall of Fame. It's no one else's say for what his widow needs to do. If they don't want him in part of anything, they have the right to do so. So, it is what it is. But right now, it's going to be interesting because with the matches tomorrow, and then what you have going on with SmackDown, it leaves something to wonder what is up for Raw. And they announced that Apollo's first match would be on for his the first match as U.S. titled champion is against a mystery opponent. Well, instead of doing Andrade, why don't you just throw somebody out there from, the brand invitational? And why not you just put Guilak in it, or you put somebody else there and just give Apollo a run? Hell, why don't you put Keith Lee in there and see what Keith Lee can do? Give the North American title champion and go title versus title, but not on a non-title basis. It would be a barn burner. It'll be one of those matches where everybody just goes all out crazy and enjoys it. It's just passion, But WWE also, with all the plexiglass and stuff, when I saw that, I thought somebody was going to get forechecked into it. But, everything with that is just they're doing what they can. But is it the right decision? Probably not. Just because with all the stuff with COVID, there's stuff we still don't know that's out there that's happening. There's stuff that we have to figure out that's going to happen. I mean, here in the States, they could be passing another stimulus package just to have everybody able to keep afloat. For me, as an essential employee, it's been extremely difficult, but you got to make through somehow. And having good people around you is kind of like with Warren, Trevor, Benny, Kristen, Sean, everybody that's here or at watching, that's supporting. It's important because you need people to lift you up on hard times. So, but this is the first show, and we'll see what goes. And only time will tell what will happen. But I'm going to cut this early. Figure to see how far we can go. But before you guys end up heading out here, hit the subscribe button. Tap that notifications, and just come up, and just anytime you guys see me on here, just say hi and talk. Also, tomorrow, you also have the Wednesday Night Wars going with, Sean, Alex, and Warren hosting. They're going to cover all the AEW and the NXT stuff. Also, Warren will be there also on his own show on Thursday on the Mr.Warren Hayes show on Thursdays. So you just got to catch that. And on top of that, you also have to catch the Raw review with Sean and Denise. Very, very good stuff. Very, very good everything. Also, right up there, go to BelltoBelles.com. You're going to end up finding the best things about women's wrestling in general. Also, you're going to end up finding an article from Mick Foley that was just recently published about how women's wrestling has actually impacted his life and his career. Also, do what I did. Become a member of Fightful Select. Go to their Patreon. Become a member. And sign up and all sorts of stuff. Go to Fightful.com to get all your news for MMA, boxing, and stuff. Also, if you need to reach me out, you can hit me at Throwback at 978 on Twitter. I also have a Patreon that's starting, but it's just a start. Also, the rest of the people I had mentioned, Warren and everybody, is right in the description below. Thank you guys so much. Have a good night. That's the first show. Let's see what happens next.